I had my children on the floor. I was on my favourite blanket that my grandmother gave me on the floor like a cat.
And I realised in that moment the potential of what our bodies can really do as women. Like I could feel his head, I could do my own internal, like, yeah, his head, I could feel it.
I was in tears, I was just in tears and overwhelmed with gratitude.
Hi and welcome to the Natural Birth Podcast, the podcast that is bringing embodied birth wisdom from women from all over the world sharing their natural birth stories. Don't forget to subscribe and download so that you can always have access to these empowering and positive natural birth stories. Hi, my name is Anna and I am the Natural Birth Podcast host. I'm a former midwife who left the system and I'm now the proud founder of Sacred Birth International, a woman-owned company with a mission to revolutionize the birth world and bring focus to the sacred and the natural intelligence of the birth process. We do this by providing world-class education, courses, programs, and coaching to equip women with the knowledge and the tools to have conscious pregnancies, empowering and positive birth experiences, and the most nourishing start possible for themselves and their babies postpartum. We also educate and mentor aspiring birth workers into sacred space holders and physiological birth advocates in the Sacred Birth Worker Mentorship, the Beyond a Doula training. If you'd like to work with me or take any of our courses, programs, or the mentorship, then head on over to sacredbirthinternational.com to find out more. Hi, Patricia, and welcome to the Natural Birth Podcast. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Excited to have you all the way from South Korea. So what is the time zone there? Like, what's the time at the moment?
The time zone here is Korean Standard Time, so KST. And so as of recording right now, it's about 7 p.m. our time here.
All right, yeah. So it's 11 a.m. here in Central European time. Right. I was just curious because I just realized I actually don't know what time it is for you. So thank you for coming
it's quite
on.
a jump.
Yeah, thanks for coming on during your evening. I hope you will have the brain power to share your story as you want it to be shared. So today we're going to dive into your birth story in Korea, which is super curious. I haven't had a podcast guest so far from Korea, so I'm looking forward to hearing about the birthing culture and also maybe how it was to be pregnant there. So take us back to, I know you want to start with conception, so take us back to conceiving your baby and your journey here.
Yes, thank you so much. And we are, for some context, we are an American military family living here overseas for my husband's job. And to rewind a little bit, I had a career in the active duty Air Force as well in the military. And that's how my husband and I met. We were both stationed actually in Germany around the same time. I was there for Air Force, he was there for Army. And we met there, and that's where our story began. And then we were fortunate enough to be able to move back to the States and be close enough to one another. And our relationship continued. And we got married around the time when I finished up my military career for active duty. And so we were able to get married and we started living together where he was stationed in Kansas. And we started trying to conceive right away once we got married. And that took some time, which I think everybody has a little bit different story. It seems like there's always a range of stories on how babies come to be in the world. And so for us personally, it had been 3 or 4 months. And then I encouraged us just to get some wellness checks for our reproductive health, because I was at the time, I was like 32 going into 33. He had just turned to his 30s. And so we got wellness checks, each of us. And I don't know if it's really common in Europe or around the world to really do those types of reproduction wellness checks early on in the process. We were told normally that you're supposed to try for at least a year before you start getting like checks on maybe why you aren't conceiving. Is that similar to where you are
Mm.
at?
Yeah, that's kind of the idea. Or that, like, for example, here in Sweden, if you have actively tried for a year, then you can get free help with those tests. And also, if there's any sort of problem, like you get free IVF or other kind of support. So I guess it also looks
Wow, okay.
in the world, but that's how it is here. You kind of, as a couple, have had to try yourself for a year before you're kind of eligible for that help. But you can do it yourself. Obviously, you can pay for your own and do whenever, and you don't have to wait. But yes, if you here in Sweden want to do it through the publicly funded, healthcare system, you have to kind of try for that time.
That makes sense. Well, and thankfully for us, we had very like supportive providers at the time where we were at. And so given my age and then also my husband has some childhood history of just for the scientific word, like testicular trauma. And so I thought, you know what, let's go ahead and get checked out because we don't really know exactly what we're working with. And my background, training and education is in veterinary medicine. So I'm a doctor of veterinary medicine. I did public health in the Air Force. And then when we got married, I was working as a veterinarian in Kansas. And so my mind automatically went to, let's just do the basic checks. And so that brought to light that my husband, he has low sperm quality in the fact of he has a good number of sperm, but motility and morphology are on the lower side or on the less efficient side, so to speak. And so with that information in mind, we were still trying just the old fashioned way, like tracking cycle and timing things at home. And then we were approaching the year mark, and then we did go through a lot of prayer and a lot of personal discernment and through some research and consultation. And we decided to use intrauterine insemination assistance to help conceive. And that was actually what worked for us. And that was just honestly, it was a very nice way to conceive because it was a very warm environment. They're very helpful. And also it took a lot of the stress and a lot of like the scheduling out of the home environment. And it left that like a more peaceful zone. And then we were able to do IUI, the intrauterine insemination, to be able to help conceive our baby girl, Sylvia. So I wanted to include that for some listeners who might have similar story going on.
Lovely. I love having all kinds of stories on this podcast to just show the variations that's out there. And, that also I've had, I think at least one, maybe more, that have also gone through the IVF process. And that also you can start that way. That doesn't mean you have to go through like a medicalized pregnancy and birth if you don't wish to do so. And that, because I think a lot of people can have that idea. And also, I mean, statistically, most people who do start in that end do end up also continuing on that. And I think it's really beautiful to showcase that there's alternatives and that doesn't mean that at all.
Yeah, so that was exactly it for us. And thankfully, we have a very open conversation style in our marriage. And like I said, through that prayer and that discernment and consult, it was very clear to us that we felt safe and comfortable with the IUI route. And then for other reasons, we knew that if that didn't work, then that would be the end of the story for us, that we weren't comfortable going on to try additional treatments. But I think it's good to mention too, because I mean, we even signed up for to go through the route to be adoptive parents in our area. And through that particular group, we were 25th in the waiting line to even get on the waiting list. And so it was going to be not even in the foreseeable future in this decade to where we would be able to adopt through that route and through that process. So I think it's just, so many ways to build a family. It's just, I think it's nice to talk about.
Yes. And what I was going to say, I think it's so sad that it is that long time to wait because there's so many babies and children that actually need a family. But somehow, and this seems to be a thing all over the world, doesn't matter what country you're in, it seems to be such a huge, lengthy process, which is such a shame when there's so many children that would really benefit from a home.
It really is. And that's still a possibility for us as well. And I'm grateful that I was able to experience the pregnancy and the birth, and we'll talk about that. And it is important because we have families that have gone through the adoption process. It takes a lot of time. And then also it can take a lot of money too, if you find a service that does it in a little bit more expedited or faster way. At least in the United States, sometimes you're talking $20,000, $50,000 plus. And that's your dream and that's how you're building a family. But you're right, there are a lot of barriers to those kids that need homes and need families, that you could have a whole nother conversation about that with people that are more knowledgeable than me, I'm sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. But yeah, that's just definitely something that just feels very alive, that it's sad when both there's people wanting to be parents and have so much love to give, and there's children that so need that love and support and security and all of that. So anyways,
I know.
we're not here to talk about that.
I know. We'll pray that they match and they find each other. And for our story today, that's a little bit where it picks up, because we were able to do a round of the intrauterine insemination. And so Sean was there with me because he gave his sample to the doctor's office into their process, and then they were able to do the IUI directly into my uterus. And so then we just waited, and then about a month later I took the pregnancy test, and it was the first ever pregnancy test that was positive for me. So I was a little bit in shock, and in happy shock, and all the surprise, and we were really, really excited. And so from there, we were not expecting to move to Korea yet, because we were pretty firmly planted in Kansas, and I was working at the veterinary clinic, my job there where we were at in Kansas, and Sean was settled in his Army job. We knew that we would be moving somewhere in the coming months, but we didn't know where yet. And we actually did select Korea as one of the possibilities for us to go. Because I lived here before when I was Air Force, so we were excited to try and come back again. And then we got orders to Korea, and that takes a few months sometimes. So for us, to fast forward a little bit, Sean arrived in Korea a couple months before I did, so he was able to do all of the house hunting and get us settled into a location that was going to be good, because personally I did not want to try and do that in the late months of pregnancy. I don't want to be house hunting in the heat in Korea. It's so hot and humid all the time. And so thankfully I was able to arrive here in September, and that was about a month before my due date. And so the flight over was really long, but it was really a non-issue. I was able to walk around and drink a lot of water, stay hydrated. And then we landed here in Korea, a little bit of a whirlwind, getting unpacked. I put all of my nesting to good use by unpacking like our whole house in the matter of a couple weeks, and unpacking all the boxes and getting everything situated. And for the military, you're automatically enrolled in the military healthcare system. Because of the type of insurance that we had. So there's some pros and cons to that. The good thing is that you have reliable health care, and we're very thankful to have that. But the downside is, especially overseas, you're very limited to what options you have in regards to, for example, it's a traditional hospital setting. The hospital medical military hospital I was assigned to serves a lot of the families here. And so it's English speaking, it's a lot of American staff, it's a traditional obstetrics led hospital for the labor and delivery ward. And at the time I was not savvy, and I didn't know a lot of the options that I might have off post on the economy. I did a little bit of research because I had a dream, like I really, really, really wanted to have a home birth. And so I did reach out to some of the Korean midwives in the area that do support home births, but for their safety matrix, they were not comfortable supporting a mother when it was her first birth for her home birth. And so I didn't apply for the care under their kind of like safety window, which I understand. It was going to be a short time to kind of build that relationship, less than a month, to be able to build that trust and build that relationship. And the traditional Korean hospitals off base, off post, there's not really a lot of communication between the medical staff and the mother. It's very much to the tune of, you do what the doctor says, you do what the medical staff says. If there's not really a lot of consent. That's not really a big term here in the traditional medical model. There are a lot of different stories of different women who have had some of the stories from the traditional Korean model of care are a little bit scary, honestly. Like, everybody automatically will have an episiotomy. You're not allowed to leave the bed. You have to be on the monitors, and you can even have an advocate, and you can speak fluent Korean with your family, and you can know your choices and what's right and wrong in the traditional, I guess, in the Western model, but your wishes are really not heard a lot of times in the Korean model of obstetrics care.
Sounds like that.
And it's pretty enlightening, and there are some really good places who are trying to change that. Like right now, I'm working for the birth center that's up in Seoul, the capital, and they're very much the opposite of that. Very empowering to women, very much it's her choice, it's her journey, very supportive. And so luckily there's those services that are coming up in pockets around the country, but you really have to know where to look, and you have to search those out. And so with that being said, do you have any questions about that so far?
So did you end up then planning to birth at the military hospital? Is that where you ended up?
Yes, so that ended up being the plan, because I knew about the birth center that was in Seoul, but with traffic, I wasn't as comfortable potentially driving 2 hours plus, depending on the time of day. And so I thought, okay, I was getting my head wrapped around it. We hired a doula who's amazing. Her name is Diana. And so I was getting my head wrapped around it. I said, okay, I'm going to give birth at the hospital. I'm going to do it all natural, all physiological. And I was trying to get myself comfortable with it. And I was trying to talk myself into it a little bit, saying like, oh, this will be good for them to see. They don't see very many like natural births. They don't see very many women who want to do it without an epidural or X, Y, or Z. So I'm like, oh, this will be good for them to practice and see like what it can look like. But in the back of my mind, or even in the front of my mind, I just had this really big barrier to thinking and envisioning my birth there, because I toured it. It was fine. It's a hospital birthing location. It can only be so comfortable, and it brings a lot of peace of mind and safety to some women, but I just wasn't one of those women. And I had heard so many positive birth stories like throughout my pregnancy, because I'll say luckily when I was working at the vet clinic, I had an hour-long commute like to and from work. So I was just listening to so many birth podcasts and stories to and from. And coming from the veterinary world originally, it's like I had just seen birth so many times undisturbed, and it works the majority of the time. So I think that was just informing what I knew that I was going to need in the birth space. Just a lot of support and a lot of hands off, like, please don't touch me was going to be it. So anyways, we had our sessions with our doula, and she was amazing. She had about 8 years of experience at the time. And so she came over to our house and kind of prepared us and talked us through what the hospital setting will be like. Really, we wanted to stay home as long as possible, because if you're there for the least amount of time, least amount of interventions. So we were kind of gearing up for that. And I think it might be worth noting that it was our last session, and she was having us look through a lot of pictures of moms in various phases and stages of labor. And there was one picture that really I mean, it just kind of brought me to tears because I don't know why it struck me so hard in that moment. But we were in the middle of the session and it was just a picture of a mom and she was having natural physiological birth. And it looked like you couldn't recognize anything around her. It was just like plastic and drapes, and everybody was in their like slip and slide suits, like masked up, gowned up, and the gloves on and everything. And this picture just struck me so hard because I thought, wow, even if I am successful at having this natural experience, like that's what my baby's gonna see when she comes out, is just this very odd image of a bunch of people that she doesn't know or love. And I'll get a little choked up talking about it a little bit, but for me, it was a big moment. And Sean was really kind. My husband, he was saying like, yeah, we'll do our best just to make sure that it's the experience that you want it to be. But in my gut, I still knew, I'm like, well, I'm just kind of settling. I know it's not the experience already that I want it to be. But even after that, I wrapped my mind around it. I said like, okay, we're going to do it. It's going to be good. It's going to be a good experience. And so fast forward to actual birth, Labor Day. The night before, my dad had arrived to Korea because he just had finished up a work trip. And so he flew into Korea on his own schedule. And then my mom was scheduled to arrive the next day. So this, little did we know looking back, but my dad arrived the night before I went into labor the next morning. So my dad arrived, we took him around town a little bit. We walked into our city area. We got a really nice dinner, which probably saved me the next day. It was this just delicious bone-in oxbone soup that they make in Korea with all the delicious broth and all of the yummy nutrients that you need. And it was so tasty. And I didn't realize that was going to carry me through the majority of my labor the next day. And so we walked back home. And I did lose my mucus plug that night. And I just ignored it, honestly. I just thought, oh, it's still early. I was about 3 days before my due date, for some context. And so I lost my mucus plug. I did notice it and I said, oh, that looks like the mucus plug. It'll probably grow back. We still have time. And so, yeah, then we just went to sleep that night. And the next morning, I didn't have any really feelings or sensations overnight, but the next morning I did feel a little bit of lower back pain. I would say around like 6 or 7 in the morning. But that happened pretty frequently, like throughout pregnancy. And I was grateful. I had a very, very nice pregnancy. I really didn't have really any of the negative symptoms going through it. So a little bit of lower back pain hit me that morning and I thought, oh, well, that's annoying. So I just switched over in bed to a wide-legged child's pose and just fell back asleep in that position. And the funny thing was my husband saw me in that position and he like kissed me and went to work. And I asked him, like, I asked him later on, like, what did you think? And he was like, I've seen you sleep in that position so many times. I honestly didn't think anything of it. Because he has just been he just knows that I'll just assume whatever position is most comfortable during sleep. But yes, is all this making sense so far?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So he went to work and you felt fine for him leaving?
Yeah, I was in a little bit, I think, of maybe a little bit of denial that labor was kicking off. I don't know if you've noticed that happens with some women sometimes.
Absolutely. I think most people are. I think because you also have heard, obviously, depending on who you are, but if you've heard a lot of stories, it's kind of what's recommended. Just ignore it. Don't get too excited. If you can, sleep through it. If it's night, just go about your day. And so, I mean, that is a great advice for sure. But of course, sometimes some women just don't really, kind of acknowledge that it actually probably is as well. So yeah, I mean, I've heard it before.
Yeah, so that's where we were at. And then, so Sean left to go to work. And I woke up a little bit later. I got dressed. My dad and I started fixing some oatmeal and eggs. And then all of a sudden, I had these quote unquote gas pains that were coming. And they started to like get stronger and stronger. And I was like, oh, this is so annoying. Like, these gas pains are so annoying. I wish I didn't have these right now so I can enjoy breakfast with my dad. Okay, well, lo and behold, obviously those are like labor pains and waves starting to come. And so I tried to eat a little bit of breakfast, but I just couldn't stomach it. I just had this wave of nausea come over me. And then eventually I just excused myself to go to our bathroom in our master bedroom. And I didn't know it at the time, but that was the commitment to the bathroom. I did not leave that room like once I was actually in the bathroom area. And we have a very nice bathroom here in Korea. It's pretty luxurious, all things considered, has a nice bathtub and everything. But essentially I was going through the waves and laboring through. It felt like it kicked off into active labor pretty quickly at that point. I texted my husband at around 8:30 and I said like, hey, I might be starting some labor pains, a little bit of early labor. You might want to wrap things up at work and come on home. I said, but make sure go do the grocery shopping before you come home because we need supplies for my mom and dad for when they're visiting. And he said, no, I'll just come straight home. And I was like, no, I'll be fine. You just go do the grocery shopping first. And he had to take a couple work calls because he's in patient care in the medical world as well. So he had to wrap up a couple things at work. He did the grocery shopping. And then he was able to make it home, all in all, pretty quickly. I kind of looked back at the timing because I was not aware of timing at all when all of this was happening. But Sean was able to make it back home around 10 a.m., which was good. And I had actually messaged our doula around 9:30 a.m., like from laboring on the toilet from the bathroom. I said, hey, I'm having some early labor signs. Sean's coming home to help out. And she did the pretty common recommendation where it's like, okay, just rest, try to take some rest and save your strength. And if you need to move. And I remember reading her message and being like, I'm not going to be able to rest through this. This is intense. Like these are kicking off with a bang. And so while I was waiting for Sean to come home, I just went to the first playlist that I found on Spotify. It was a Bob Marley playlist. And I was like, great, I can sway to this. And I just focused on my breathing. I had a really strong yoga practice and breath practice. And so that served me very well. And I was just like, okay, if I can just breathe through each one of these, and then it's going to just bring me to the next one and the next one. And so thank goodness for whoever put together that podcast on Spotify, because I hadn't even thought about what music or any type of items I wanted in the environment. And so I was able to ride those waves with a little bit of Bob Marley help. And then Sean was able to come home, and he made it home, like I said, around 10 a.m. And at this point, I don't know exactly how to explain it, but I was very, very quiet, and I was very focused on handling and kind of riding the waves of the surges that were coming through me. And I was able to, right before he got home and I was just by myself for a little bit, just laboring by myself for a while, I did have this moment where I was kind of scared. I was really scared about, really honestly, like how painful and how intense things were. And it seemingly, like hindsight, I didn't know how far away I was from actually the pushing and actually giving birth to our daughter. So in my mind, it was really on top of me. And I was like, I don't know how long I can do this for with this intensity. And then in that moment, I had a little bit of like a get it together moment inside my head. I was like, no, if you think like that, it's going to be eternity. You're not going to make it. So you better get your mind right, and you better start breathing through these, because that's the only thing that's really going to get you through it. And my mind latched on to an affirmation that I had heard It was on a Spotify playlist, an affirmation that you can use when you're going to bed at night. And it was, my waves cannot be bigger than me because my waves are me. And that was something that my mind just latched onto. And I was able to just repeat that anytime I felt the contraction build, 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 and then through the peak, and then release it with my breath at the back end of it. So I did want to share that moment where I really thought, like, I don't know if I can do this, because of how intense it started off, right, seemingly at the very beginning. And so,
That is,
but
it's not too uncommon. And I just really want to say that because I think, we often hear, which is true, like most first-time mamas and most women will have kind of early labor and it will be regular and not so strong. But for some, just like you, it just happens and it is strong from the get-go and it's quite regular and intense.
yes, and it was funny looking back because my husband and I told him, I said, oh, we're going to need a lot of things to do during early labor. So I had found a couple hikes that we can do, some walks. I wanted to bake cupcakes for the hospital staff for Sylvia's birthday. And I couldn't even when quote unquote early labor started, I was having to like pause conversations with my dad and breathe through those early pains. And then it even intensified from there. And so Sean made it home. And even from his perspective, he was thinking, if this is early labor, our doula made it sound a lot calmer than this looks. He was like, how much more intense is this going to get? And so to him too, it was his first time seeing a birthing woman. And so he came home, I had him start the bath for me. And that was pretty magical, is the only thing I can say, getting into that hot water. And I know that sometimes they say, oh, a bath can maybe slow things down. Well, I really needed things to slow down a little bit in that moment. I needed that comfort. I needed to catch my breath and to be able to be in that really comfortable water. And so Sean was able to be there with me. He had to step out a couple times to call a airport shuttle to pick up my mom because she was landing in a few hours at the Seoul airport. So he obviously was not going to be able to go pick her up. So he stepped out to make a couple phone calls and then came back in. And I'm managing things, I think, quite well in the tub. And I asked him, I said, how far apart do you think these contractions are? And he said, I don't know. Do you want me to time them? I said, yeah, you can time them, but don't tell me. Don't tell me what it says. I don't want to know. And so I go through a couple contractions and then I kind of open my eyes. I flutter my eyelids open a little bit. I'm just staring at the water. And I asked him, I said, okay, are they pretty close? And he goes, I can't tell when you're having a contraction. And so in my mind, I was like, you got to be kidding me. You can't tell when I'm having a contraction. But then I thought, oh, wait, that's a good sign. It means like I'm handling them really well, right? And so I said, okay, I like calmed myself down mentally from like whatever frustration I was feeling. And I said, okay, I'm just going to tap my finger on the side of the tub when I feel it start and when I feel it end. Okay. So then he timed a couple that way. And I said, okay, were you able to time those? And he said, yeah, I'm just going to step out to call Diana, who was our doula. So lo and behold, he told me after the fact that his little app was kind of like blaring kind of an alert at him saying like, you should be at your birthing location, go to the hospital, you should be at your birthing location. And so obviously we were still at home. So he just so calmly, like, I'm so happy he's my husband and I'm so happy he was there for me because he did not let anything on. This was all after the fact when we were kind of just going over the whole story. So he said, I'm going to step out. I'm going to call Diana. I said, okay. And so again, I'm riding these waves through the tub and with Bob Marley at my side still. And it gets pretty blurry. The only reason I have like these time hacks is because I looked back through the text messages, but at some point, Sean comes back into the bathroom. He tries to get the birthing blow up tub blown up for me because I was just in the hard fixed tub at the time. He gets it about halfway blown up, and my mind is just like, no, that needs to get out of this space. It's blocking me from getting to the toilet. It's so big in this space. So I just said, forget that, just like get it away. And so he deflates it, puts it away in the other room. And then all of a sudden I get this huge urge to get out of the tub and go back over to the toilet. And so feeling a lot of pressure at this point, a lot of those like deep pelvic sensations. And that's where I'm at for, I guess, a while. And then my doula arrives. When did she arrive? She arrived around 1 p.m. Is what she told me. And from that point, she gets there, and I think she clocked on to, I think a baby might be coming soon-ish, quite possibly. So she she didn't talk or anything when she first came in. She was really, really good at, I think she's just a very intuitive person. She knew that I didn't want a lot of talking. I didn't want a lot of input. I just wanted to be able to very much listen to my body. And at the time, I don't even know if I registered it as listening to my body per se. I just know that when I'm going through something, I just don't want a lot of chatter or a lot of words coming at me. And so she knew that because we had talked about it ahead of time. And she was just very intuitive. She put like a yoga block underneath one of my feet when I was on the toilet. She did some pressure points on my legs, which was really comforting. It was really cute. Sean like got a wet washcloth and put it on the back of my neck, and that was way too chilly and way too cold. So I just said, too cold, no thank you, no thank you. So they traded off doing some pressure points. And then at some point I could sense the feeling in the room in between contractions. I could sense a little bit that we were on the fence of like, what do we do here? I think Sean and Diana, they were a little bit looking at each other. I was pretty much had my gaze very much down, eyes almost closed. I was in my own little zone. And then at some point, Diana said, okay, we probably need to start thinking about going to the hospital. And that word just, in my head, I was like, okay, but I think my labor really kind of felt me tense and clamped to like just the thought of, okay, I have to get out of this bathroom. How am I going to do that? I can't even imagine relocating from this position right now. And I have to put a robe on because I can't go there naked, like in the car. I'm going to have to climb into the car. So all this was going through my head, and I was kind of playing along for a little bit. And I said, okay, yeah, grab my robe. It's right there. I can try. And so Sean and Diana, they were ready to help me. They were ready to go about it. But then another huge wave came, and I just got those full body shakes, and that huge, like, I guess that transition and that adrenaline rush that starts to come on. And it was so intense. And then right when that one ended, I was able to catch my breath a little bit, and we kind of had a little bit of a session where I said, I don't know if I can go. I don't know if I can make it. Like, what are we going to do? And we were just kind of brainstorming a little bit. And then I said, do we call 119, which is the emergency services here? And then Sean was like, well, it's not an emergency. You're doing a great job. And I said, yeah, you're right. It's not an emergency. And I said, Diana, like, what do you think? She was like, it's whatever you want to do, Mama. It is whatever you want to do. And so in that moment, I was able, thankfully, I was so blessed to have that moment of clarity in my head where if I forced myself to go to the hospital right now, that would only be to serve other people. And whether it's the system or whether it's to make Diana more comfortable so she's not put in a compromising position as like my doula, or to make Sean feel more at ease with it. I was projecting all of these emotions that they weren't even putting on me. They were totally being supportive, but my brain was going through, like, I wanted to make other people comfortable. And then I had this moment of clarity where I said, like, no, what do you need to have happen in this moment? Is this going to be your birth story? You did it to make everyone else feel more comfortable and to go with what's expected right now? Or are you going to really just do what you need to do for yourself and your baby in this moment. And that aha moment set in. And then we waited, another wave came through. And then after that one, I just fluttered my eyelids open a little bit. I was still looking down in my zone, and I just said, I need to stay here. And that was it. That was the sentence. And then both of them just said, okay, we're staying here. And then right at that moment, it's like my body got the signal that this is where we're having this baby, because right after that, I got this huge, I don't even know how to describe it, but it was this convulsion or propulsion, however you want to say it. And it just catapulted me a little bit across the room over into where the tub was at. And I was just leaning my elbows on the side of the tub, and my knees were on the ground next to the tub. And that is when my body, I think, started going into that pushing phase, because at that point I was able to really feel that pressure that was just baby moving through the birth canal, essentially. And my body was totally in control of, like, okay, I need to move my knee up over here. I need to move my foot to the side. Okay, I need to crouch a little bit here and there. And Sean and Diana did a great job. Like, they were trying to offer me water. They were trying to get me to drink a little bit, but even the water was like just too intense for me a little bit. It had just the tiniest bit of like electrolytes in it. And I kept having Sean like water it down and water it down. And even then I could just like smell a little bit of like additive in it. And it was just too much. I couldn't keep it down. But that was the position I ended up giving birth to her in. Right there, crouched in the bathroom, and elbows were up on the side of the tub, because I just felt like I was very grounded there. I felt very secure right there. And I was able to feel her coming down, down, down. And then at one point, my waters, like the bag of waters, did start to like come through. And then those were birthed a little bit before she was birthed. And I just remember it was kind of weird to say after the fact, but it was a little bit distracting having the bag of waters just kind of like half in, half out. And then I asked my doula, I was like, is there something we can do about that? Like, can I just pull that out? And she was like, whatever you feel like you need to do. I was like, okay, great. Because they were super distracting and bothering me. So I was able to birth the waters. It was kind of like this tiny water balloon, because it had resealed a little bit on its way out. And then at one point I had a break in between those pushing contractions, and I asked out loud, I said, am I doing a good job? And then my doula just starts laughing and giggling. Sean starts laughing, and they were so sweet, but they're like, yes, you're doing an amazing job. But that was in one moment where I was like, I do need a little bit of verbal encouragement here, because this is intense and this is like a lot of work. And so then do you have any questions up to that point? And then I'll just go into how she was birthed for the final stretch. Okay. And from that point, I was able to reach down and I felt her head crowning. I wouldn't say I felt her head crowning per se. Let me think how it felt. Yeah, I guess, yeah, you would say she was crowning at that point. She was going to stretch down there, and I felt down there, and I was able to feel her head. And I asked, I was like, is that her head? And my doula said, like, yes, that's her head. And that's the moment where it became really real, that, okay, like, this is actually happening. This is where I'm going to give birth to my baby. And then one thing led to another. I really felt my body doing the lion's share of the work. I pretty much just had to get my mind out of the way a little bit. And I just remember I had these pretty big breaks in between the pushing contractions where I was able to catch my breath. And I was kind of thinking, okay, when's the next one going to come? Where do I feel? Where do I feel I need to be? And I remember thinking that if I hold still, the contractions paused. And then I also remember thinking, well, I can't just hold still forever. Like, we need to keep moving to keep baby coming towards us and coming into the world. And so at that point, like I lifted my knee, I lifted my leg a little bit, and then another huge contraction came. And then all of a sudden, my doula, Diana, she asked my husband, Sean, she was like, do you have anything like a suction or a bulb or something for when the baby's born, we can like get some of the fluid off of her nose. And so they started to try and look for that a little bit. And then my doula, Diana, she was like, nope, Sean, get ready to catch. Because it was only, I think, one more push after that. And then she came out pretty much like a rocket. She came out head, shoulders, knees, and toes. There wasn't any head comes out and then shoulders and then the rest of her body. She came out in one solid push, and Sean was able to catch her and was able to have a hold on her and do some just was able to catch her and do some skin to skin. And I just took a couple breaths to catch my breath a little bit. And when she was born, I remember saying, is she out? And they said, yep, she's out. And Sean was able to note the time. And I was able to get turned around and face Sylvia, our baby girl, and Sean. And I was able to get turned around and sit down on our bathroom floor. And she was born. The cord was not around her neck at all when she was born, but Sean, a little bit trying to pass her to me, got the cord, put a little cord scarf around her neck, which was kind of humorous in hindsight, but she was absolutely fine. And so, yeah, I just got to hold her after that, and she didn't cry at all, but she was very much alert. She had the most, I could only describe it as inquisitive look on her face, with just this one eyebrow up and one eyebrow down, and just looking at us. Her eyes were wide. She was very lively. She was very lively when she came out. And so I wasn't too worried that she wasn't making a lot of noise, because that can be completely normal. And then I thought, well, we don't have like the suction bulb thing, that we couldn't find it. And so I just put my mouth to her mouth and gave like a real big suck around her mouth and nose to clear out a little bit more of that fluid. That just made sense to me at the time, because it was like, oh, well, that'll help clear some stuff out. That'll work out. And then, yeah, we were able to sit there in that moment. And I was trying to think about how to describe that moment when she was born, like the huge wave of relief, but then also to see her, it was, the only thing I could describe it as is a little bit of a runner's high, but exponential to that, so much more. But you have all of this kind of exhaustion mixed with excitement and mixed with all this emotion going on in one very, very compact moment. And so it was a pretty perfect, beautiful, unplanned surprise home birth, as far as everything's considered. And I think it worked out exactly how it was supposed to work out. And yes, any questions about how baby was born? And I can also tell about how the placenta was born as well.
I think you're very good at sharing your story. There's absolutely no questions about how your baby was born. That was very clear. And yeah, it's interesting how, the depths of our desires kind of do happen when they're strong enough. And I mean, on top of this, it sounds like in your story, both being a vet, and maybe with the people you had around you, but you were just not faced with birthing your baby without quote unquote, medical personnel around. And I mean, that's quite unique. I think most women who plan to have a birth somewhere else would have that thought, even though they might really feel that instinctual primal desire to stay in their bathroom and in their home. There might be fear I need to be somewhere else for this, but it sounds like you had none. And I love that. I love that so much. I mean, it helps seeing so many animals birth as well, doesn't it?
I think so. And I grew up on a farm. Our family has like a very small farm in Oklahoma. And we were always around agriculture because we grew up in Oklahoma. And coming from the vet world, I mean, you do see death in that process as well. And so it's not lost on me how fortunate and how blessed we were to have such a healthy story at home. And depending on who I tell the story to, there's a lot of different reactions. Some people will say, "Oh, that's amazing. I wish I had that." Or some people say, "Oh my gosh, that's nuts. That's crazy. Like they can't even fathom it." And I don't try to explain every layer and level of who I am and my relationship with that birth process, but it did help. I mean, we weren't a bunch of rookies in the room either. Like my husband, he's a psychiatric nurse practitioner, so he did have nurse training before he went into mental health care. And then also our doula had 8 years of experience, and then she was also like starting her midwifery training as well. And then me also coming from that medical world. And then at the time, I had not attended any births as a doula at the time, but I had actually done the doula training because I did want to take a break from full-time work when we were over here in Korea, so I could stay home with our daughter more. And so it was a little bit just convenient and logistics. I looked into natural birth classes in our area, but it was actually more affordable to take the doula training. And so I went ahead and took the doula training and then thought, well, if I'm able to help some moms and some babies, like while we're over here in Korea. So I was, after Sylvia was born, I was able to do my 3 births and do the full certification and everything like that. But essentially, we had all the tools that we needed in that space. And again, we were blessed and fortunate to have, like most births are, a very healthy outcome.
I was just going to say that's something that you mentioned before too, that actually when physiology is upheld, like the chance of everything going perfectly fine is very extremely high, like in the 99% kind of thing. I think it's very rare for something to deviate. Of course, that 1% does exist, and that happens in animal kingdom as in our human one. And but yeah, I just wanted to kind of emphasize how I love that about your story, though, how it was, in your story at least, you had no thoughts of anything else, but then it was perfectly perfect to just stay at home, which I mean is really primal. And I think if most women were very much so in tune with their birthing bodies and trusting the process and understanding the process, they would actually feel that too.
And I think that's it. When obviously you've talked to this point so many times with your stories and how supported I felt in that moment to make my own decision for what I needed. And then both Sean and Diana, they just said, okay, we're staying here. And it was as simple as that. All I had to do was say the sentence, and then they were completely on board. And I'm so grateful that they were the two that were in the room. My dad was in the house. He didn't realize I was in labor or like having a baby. He was working on some of his study courses for a training that he had coming up for. And in the morning, he had offered me some Pepto-Bismol to help with the gas pains. And that's around when I excused myself and texted Sean. But my dad is also very supportive. At one point, Sean came out to get something to help get the bag of waters, because Diana said, okay, well, if you have like a pair of scissors or something, like maybe if it's too uncomfortable to like pull them, maybe we can just kind of like snip it away and it's no problem. So Sean came out to like maybe clean a pair of scissors, and my dad was like, hey, what's going on? And Sean told him, well, it looks like we're having the baby here. And my dad was like, okay, let me know if you need anything. Like, did not faze him. He was just, okay, they know what they're doing, over in the bathroom area. And so that was pretty funny to unpack after the fact, because it was really emotional too that my dad was here, because he actually he had a full military career as well, and he was actually he was on a trip because he's a pilot, so he was on a trip when I was born. So he got to be at my birth. I think 3 days after I was born. And so it was kind of fun to come full circle, where I was his first daughter and that Sylvia is his first granddaughter. So he was able to be there for her birth and be able to meet her as she came into the world. Because from there, we hung out at home for a while. We were I mean, we didn't really have any rush. I did feel the need to go to the military hospital for aftercare. Just physically I wanted to be checked out. I wanted Sylvia to go through. Really, our hands were a little bit tied because we did need some sort of documentation from the actual system, because we're not citizens here in Korea. We actually did need some sort of medical agency to say, okay, yes, she was born at this time, baby girl, so we could get all of our official documents in order. But there was really no rush to do that.
Did you birth the placenta?
Yes, and so that we just took our time. We were in the bathroom for a while. I was just holding her, and then my doula asked, like, okay, do we want to move to the bed? Maybe baby wants to try nursing. Placenta wasn't born yet, but I think it was only maybe 20 minutes or so when placenta was born. I was able to just lie down in bed. Sylvia started nursing right away. She was rooting around really vigorously, and so I brought her to just like my left breast, and she latched right away, and then that triggered I think enough of the contractions to birth the placenta on its own, because then a couple contractions later the uterus did its job beautifully, and then placenta was born, and Sylvia was able to nurse, and we were just kind of cuddled together as a family, taking our time with it. And we were able to leave the cord intact, which is something that I wanted anyways. I didn't have plans of leaving it intact for to where it fell off on its own, even though I knew that could be an option. I just didn't feel the need to do that. But yeah, we were able to leave the cord intact, and I was able shower while Sean and Diana took care of Sylvia for a little bit, and then we got kind of packed up. We put the placenta in a bowl, and Sylvia and I loaded up into the backseat of the car, and were able to drive over to the military hospitals about 20 minutes away. And my dad was able to send a couple pictures to my mom, who was still in midair, mind you, flying from the United States to Korea. When she left the United States, there was no labor happening. There was nothing happening. And then by the time she landed in Seoul, she had pictures of her first grandbaby and me, like bundled up, ready to go over to get checked out at the hospital. And that was pretty cute. She was at the baggage claim when she got Wi-Fi, and she saw the pictures, and she starts crying, happy tears. And then the little helpers like came over to comfort her, and they said, oh, it's okay, your baggage will come, like, don't worry, like the baggage will get here. And she had to explain, like, oh no, it's because I have pictures of my grandbaby who was just born. And so that was pretty funny. But yeah, we were able to go up to the hospital, and they were very kind and welcoming. I did have a little bit of anxiety about going to the hospital. I didn't really want to be judged or like critiqued in any way, but I think the hospital staff, they were just actually pretty grateful that we had the birth at home in a way, because they were full that night, and they had like back-to-back C-sections. They had almost all their rooms were full at the time. And so after the fact, they said that it's like it probably worked out for the best, because they probably would have had to reroute me potentially to one of the off-base hospitals into the Korean system. Now, how true that is, I'm not sure, because I know that ER staff, they can also catch a baby as well. So by the time we got there, I don't think I would have been very movable. But hindsight, we'll never know how any of that might have happened. But what we do know is that, yeah, they were kind. They were really excited. Like, one of the nurses was pretty emotional with me. She just opened up, and she said, like, this is actually so nice to see. Like, we don't get to see this process work so beautifully most of the time. Like, most of the time there's always medical involvement, and we don't get to see this process happen as it should very much. And so that was a nice little moment, and they treated us really well. But yeah, Sylvia didn't even cry until we got to the hospital, and they started doing like their physical exam on her, and they were very gentle and very kind with her. But it was, again, the hospital setting. And I did have a tear for when she was born. So I was very grateful to have that medical assistance because it was a grade 2 tear is what they assessed it as. And I discussed it with the OB and definitely opted for stitches for the suture because I felt it was warranted for that. So I was grateful to have that care when I needed it. And I think I do know a little bit maybe why I tore. I did get a little bit excited to birth Sylvia because she was crowning, but I did get my voluntary muscles involved at some point and like kind of bear down to birth her because I didn't really have this fear, but I think in that moment I did realize that, okay, this is potentially like a little bit of the sticky part of birth and my potentially with shoulder dystocia or what have you. And my birth story, I had been told my whole life that I was a shoulder dystocia, had a really low APGAR score when I was born. The doctors were like, didn't know how I would do, if I would be partially paralyzed. And so I had looking back on it, I think maybe a little bit of that fear played into that moment of birthing her into the world. And in my mind, I think I knew that, well, I just want her here on the outside and I'll sacrifice a bit of my body to get her here safely. And I think that maybe played a little bit of a mental role in it. And so I would be interested to see, God willing, in subsequent births, if I'm able to really, really get my mind out of the way and see if I can let baby out really at my body's pace and at the baby's pace in that pushing stage.
Yeah.
But I've worked, yeah, go ahead.
And maybe, with the next, if you do have a home birth midwife and you plan for home birth, you'll have that safety of someone who can handle a shoulder dystocia, so you don't have to feel like you have to take the responsibility to do something about that, right? You can breathe your baby out. You can maybe have that big pause, have a bit more crowning, not push so hard so that the baby flies out, but have the head and then gently the shoulders, maybe on the next contraction or two. And it also, it's very curious. I loved your story, how you were really following your impulses. And that is so true. When someone is fully following their physiology, they will feel, I need to put my leg up. I need to switch my foot out like this. I need to change into this position. And so actually, for example, like a shoulder dystocia is very rare when there's a physiological birth happening. It's so much more often happening when a woman is on her back, especially in stirrups, especially if she doesn't, she's medicated. And it doesn't matter then if it's a 2.5 kilo baby or a 4.5 kilo baby. It has nothing to do with size. It's very much, if a woman follows her instincts like you did, the risk of a shoulder dystocia is minimal, like minimal. And, having had a home birth midwife there, maybe you wouldn't have had that thought at all.
And maybe not. And she was a perfect size. And she was in a great position to be born. And so I've had to work through that a little bit too, where it's like, okay, I tore, but I did everything I did everything I could or could have possibly done. And then just working through that a little bit, or a lot of it actually, I think I'm in a good space about it now. But even after, I did have a lot of like these self-critiquing thoughts of like, what could I have done better? And then to get over that a little bit and say like, no, you did a really good job. Like, and tears happen and sometimes it's okay. It's definitely okay. And it's something that like, it's just, and maybe it taught me a little bit too, where it definitely helped me take it more easy in the postpartum, because I think I would have probably overdid it in the postpartum a bit more. But honestly, that little physical reminder of, okay, you've been walking too much today, you need to lay down, you really need to take it easy. So I think there's a silver lining in it. And I got that a little bit from your podcast too, where it's like, well, what can that teach you? And how did that maybe help you, or how did that serve you? And reframing it a little bit like that has helped a lot.
I love that. And also, I just really want to say that like having a tear is not a failure. I think that's really important. And also that um, it's very rare to get a tear that's really bad. It's rare. And I think we need to remember that. And the biggest risk of having a really big tear is actually being in the hospital and having a medicalized birth. So if you want to avoid a big tear, then you avoid that. Having a first or second degree tear is quite common. About 50% of women have them. We can obviously discuss what the percentage is at home birth versus hospital, which is definitely a big difference. But even at home and totally having, a physiological natural birth doesn't prevent you from having a tear. And a 1 to 2 degree tear, most of them heal naturally perfectly on their own. Some can be a little bit different in the way that you tore, even if it's a 2 degree, that would, it would serve to have stitches, but not all 2 degree tears even need that, right? So it's also like nature is wise and your body is so amazing at healing. And that's one of the things I really want to say about tearing, because I know this is a big fear for most women. Like, of course it is, that, when you bite your tongue, it hurts like hell. You bleed so much, but like in 2 days' time, it's not even there anymore. You don't even remember it. It's gone. Like your vulva is better at healing after birth than your tongue and your mouth. And so if you have that in the back of your head as you're birthing your baby, maybe that releases some of the fear around tearing, because your vulva is so amazing at healing. She's like you probably noticed that in the end of your pregnancy, your vulva swells up. It just like protrudes, it gets really juicy. It's just full of blood circulation, which is essentially healing properties, as you know. And so if anyone's listening who has this fear, which most women have, like, I want you to take this pearl of wisdom away, that your vulva is meant to heal.
Exactly. And when it happened, even too, like I didn't feel it at all. And even so, that when we went to the hospital for aftercare, um, it was a little bit of there was a lot going on, but for whatever reason, I didn't even get a physical exam when we got to the hospital. It was the next day when I felt something quite like stingy down there, especially when I was using the restroom urinating. And that's when I asked, I said, can someone please check me down there because something doesn't feel right. And even to your point, it had already started to try, and the tissues already started to try and like heal a little bit. And so I was grateful that the doctor, there was a shift change. And so I actually liked the doctor better that came on shift than the doctor who was there when we arrived. So I think it all worked out. But we talked about it and I said, okay. And she said that too. She was like, some can heal on their own. And I said, can you just show me a picture so I can see what we're working with? She said, sure. And I saw the picture because I'm medical. And I was like, yeah, I want this. I want the sutures for that. So
Beautiful.
I felt very empowered by that decision.
Yeah.
And say like, okay. And I know myself, I don't think I will be good at keeping my legs as together as they need to be for that natural healing process.
Yeah.
And so it was nice. I had a discussion with her, and then that's the route that we chose. But just to let people know, I didn't even feel it when it occurred. There was just so much endorphins going through my body at that point. It's very protective, I think,
Yes. And
by design.
the reason you tear is also like, the skin and also the muscle, it just whitens because there's no blood circulation. There's just like, you don't feel it because of that, right? And so there's a protection mechanism in birth that is there for you. Yes, that's just also what I want to say. It's like your tissues will stretch so far that it's simply like where that happens, you don't feel it.
It's pretty incredible. The whole birth process is completely incredible. And and I'm just so grateful that everything unfolded the way it did. So grateful for the preparation that it did. I was able to have a lot of movement, and before giving birth, I was able to have a really great yoga practice. We were able to have a good prayer routine as well. And I was able to have like a lot of internal, really thought time, especially in the car, to be able to think about really what I wanted and have that space to let my desires breathe and be opened up a little bit going into it. So it was very special, very
Yeah.
special experience.
Yeah. So, if you had a first-time mama in front of you right now who's about to have her first baby, and she really wants to have a natural and empowering birth experience, what advice and pearls of wisdoms would you give to her?
For pearls of wisdom, if you have even an inkling of wanting to have that natural physiological birth, lean into it, really lean into it and trust that natural process. And if you are going to deviate from natural, do it only for a really good reason that makes some sense to you. Even if it's a small thing, like if you want to say no thank you to ultrasounds or cervical checks during your pregnancy, which is what I did, and you want to say no thank you to having that membrane sweep or having the IV line put into your arm, if that makes you feel more safe and more comfortable, then that's one thing. But if your gut is telling you, no, I don't need that at this time, just no thank you is a very powerful phrase. And you can use it liberally anytime you need to or want to. And secondly, I would say try to take some time for yourself every day. That was really helpful for me, even if it's just a moment where you can catch your breath, slow down your nervous system a little bit, take those deep breaths in, and give yourself time and practice checking in with your instincts and with your gut so that you can be able to lean into those when the moment arises. And the third thing would be something that helped me as well, where you can take the advice that helps you and you can leave the rest. You can completely set it aside. You can maybe save it for a later time, but this will really help, as it's helped me through pregnancy, through birth, and really through motherhood as well, because birth is that one event, and then motherhood for a lot of us is going to continue for a lifetime. And there's so much more opinions and ways of doing things, and you're getting a lot of information from different resources. So take what helps you and then set the rest aside. You don't need to implement or absorb everything that's coming in your direction.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your birth story in Korea.
Thank you so much for having me, Anna. I've been looking forward to this, and I'm really excited again to be on your show. And it was my birthday yesterday, so this is a little bit of like a birthday treat for myself. I'm so grateful. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. If you love this podcast, then please consider sharing it, leave a review, or make a contribution on our Patreon page. And if you want to connect on social media, then find the podcast on Instagram as The Natural Birth Podcast. Thank you for listening.